Sir Robert Anderson. Like so many other prophecy figures, Sir Robert Anderson was an Irishman of Scottish extraction with connections to the Brethren. Sir Robert was born in Dublin in 1841. He is remembered as being the Assistant Commissioner at Scotland Yard from 1888 until his death in 1918. One of the cases he worked on was that of Jack the Ripper. Sir Robert was known as an excellent investigator and wrote on subjects related to his criminal investigations. He was also a devoted evangelical Christian and wrote many books and pamphlets on the subject of the Bible and Bible prophecy. Probably the most famous was his book, The Coming Prince. In this work, he addressed the issue of Daniel's 70 weeks, Daniel chapter 9, and put in place the building blocks of our understanding of this passage. Daniel's 70 weeks. Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks. Daniel is visited by the angel Gabriel, who gives a vision of 70 weeks. This vision relates to a time period leading up to the return and cutting off of the Messiah, who we know as Jesus. Sir Robert understood the weeks to be weeks of years, i.e., 1 week was 7 years and 70 weeks was 490 years. The Messiah was to be cut off after 69 weeks, with a 7-week period remaining to be fulfilled at an unspecified time. Therefore, we have a period of 483 years, that is 69 times 7 years, to consider. One of the great questions was, when did this time period start? Basically, Daniel chapter 9 verse 24 to 27 states that from the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem there will be 69 weeks until the Messiah is cut off. Daniel 9 verse 25. We know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. So there are at least 4 possible starting points for the 69 weeks. Firstly, the decree of Cyrus, 539 BC. Ezra chapter 1 verse 3. Who is there among you of all his people? His God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel, which is in Jerusalem. Secondly, the decree of Darius, Ezra chapter 5 verses 3 to 7. So we read in verse 7. They sent him a report in which was written as follows: To Darius the king, all peace. Be it known to the king that we went to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God. It is being built with huge stones, and timber is laid in the walls. This work goes on diligently and prospers in their hands. Thirdly, the decree of Artaxerxes to Ezra, 457 BC. Ezra chapter 7 verses 11 to 13. This is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave to Ezra the priest, the scribe, a man learned in matters of the commandments of the Lord and his statutes for Israel. Artaxerxes, king of kings, to Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, peace. And now I make a decree that any one of the people of Israel or their priests or Levites in my kingdom who freely offers to go to Jerusalem may go with you. And the fourth decree is the decree of Artaxerxes to Nehemiah in 444 or 445 BC. Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 1 says, And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been beforetime sad in his presence. Verse 8. And a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace, which appertain to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me. So there are 4 possible decrees that could be possibilities for the starting point of the 69 weeks. It's worth saying that all these dates are disputed, but Sir Robert settled on the decree of Artaxerxes to Nehemiah as the correct starting point. The reason being that it was the only decree which fulfills Daniel's prophecy of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. The other 3 decrees only relate to the rebuilding of the temple. He does not mention Isaiah 44 verse 28, which other writers have cited. Isaiah 44 verse 28 says, That saith of Cyrus, He is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, Thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. This seems to fit the bill, as it talks about rebuilding Jerusalem. Consequently, many writers see the decree of Cyrus as Daniel's starting point. However, the question here is, who is speaking? In verse 26, it is the Lord who is saying that Jerusalem is to be rebuilt. In verse 28, he calls Cyrus his shepherd, but it could be argued that it is the Lord who is restating that Jerusalem shall be rebuilt. And the actual decree that Cyrus makes in Ezra chapter 1 verse 3, only the house of the Lord is mentioned. Having fixed on a decree of Artaxerxes to Nehemiah as the starting point of the 69 weeks, Sir Robert then attempted to ascertain the date of this decree. He reckons on the month of Nisan 445 BC as being the 20th year of Artaxerxes, as per Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 1. And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been beforetime sad in his presence. So Robert goes on to say in chapter 10 of his book, But no other day being named, the prophetic period must be reckoned according to a practice common to the Jews from the Jewish New Year's Day. The 70 weeks are therefore to be computed from the 1st of Nisan BC 445. Sir Robert had assistance from the Astronomer Royal at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, London, and was able to fix the date on the Julian calendar. In BC 445, the new moon by which the Passover was regulated was on the 13th of March at 7 hours 9 minutes AM, and accordingly the first Nisan must be assigned to the 14th of March. So we now have a start date of 14th of March 445 BC and a time period of 483 years, which should bring us to the date of the Messiah's cutting off. So the other question to be answered is, how long is a year? So Robert devoted chapter 6 of his book to explaining the prophetic year. He argued from the Bible that in prophecy, a year is a perfect year of 360 days. That is 12 months of 30 days each. This can be seen in several places in Scripture. See the section of this site entitled The 360-Day Prophetic Year for more details. The Jewish calendar was based on the cycles of the moon, and Sir Robert believed that in God's perfect order of things, a month was always 30 days, and a year was always 360 days. He said the prophetic year is not the Julian year, but the ancient year of 360 days. The consequence of this in terms of Daniel's 69 weeks was that the time period was 69 weeks of years, 483 years, with each year having 360 days, the total period being 483 years times 360 days, which equals 173,880 days. The final calculation. So we now have a start point of 14th of March 445 BC, and we have a time period of 173,880 days. So Robert calculated that if you added those days to the starting date, it would bring you to 6th of April 32 AD. This is what he believed to be the date of Christ's entry into Jerusalem. There has been endless discussion of this date, but one thing that can be said is that Sir Robert Anderson, with his investigative mind, put in place a framework for understanding biblical prophecy that has been followed ever since. If you're interested in Bible prophecy, you can find more information at prophecy-workshop.com. Thank you for listening.